Today on In the Woodyard, the top 10 things to make you a better sawman or woman. Here we go. So today we're going to talk about 10 things that you can do to become better with a chainsaw. Things that will make you cut more wood, cut wood faster, better, and just be safer. Number one, the most obvious one of all, use a sharp chain. If your chain is dull, stop cutting or sharpen it before you even start cutting, which is the smarter choice. And if your chain is wore out, replace it. If your bars were wore out, replace it. Don't be cheap. Don't be tight. Spend some money, buy a new chain. If your chain is getting down to where it's a nub on the teeth, little bitty teeth, put a new chain on. Some people think they can cut until basically there's no teeth. That's stupid. Once your teeth are about 2/3 of the way used up, you're wasting time. You're wasting energy, and it's not good for your saw. Your saw is more efficient when it's a sharp chain, when it's as new as possible is when it cuts the best, and sharp at all times. I myself change my chain when it gets down to where there's about 1/3 of the tooth left. If it gets below that, I'm wasting time. I can tell. As soon as I put a new chain on, I'm like, I should have did that a tank or two ago. So change your chain and keep it sharp. And what I mean by keep it sharp is that as soon as you notice that you're fighting it, change the chain. Or put a new chain on it or sharpen it. Those are your options. There are people I know that they don't know how to sharpen a chain. They just put a new chain on. Well, if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. But I recommend sharpening it. I sharpen my chain pretty much either every tank or every other tank. I know when I think that my chain is good and I'm cutting and I end a tank of gas with it, and I think, oh, it's good enough, I can keep going, and I'll cut another half a tank, like I should have sharpened it. It's rare that you can get, I think, two tanks out of a chain. Keeping it sharp as possible all the time is the best way. You're going to be more efficient, you're going to cut better. So sharpen your chain. That's huge, huge. Number two is use the right saw for the job. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about big saws and little saws. And there are some people on the West Coast that want to use the biggest saw possible at all times. That's not necessarily the right thing. And then there's people that are maybe homeowners that use a little bitty weenie saw that is not the right saw either. They should use something a little bit bigger. And I think your experience level is a big part of it. If you are a beginner, you should not be using a big chainsaw. You should not be using a big powerful chainsaw with a big long bar. You should start small and work your way up. You should learn how to operate a saw before you start with a big saw. But if you're cutting down a huge tree, you know, something that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet across, you need a big saw. If you're just limbing branches around your yard, you don't need a great big saw. A small saw is all you need. Something that's in the smaller cc size, like a 25, 30, 35, 40 cc size saw is all you need. The size of the engine doesn't need to be real big. You don't need a real big bar. And if you can't handle a big bar, you shouldn't be using it. But if you can handle a big bar, and you've got a big 30-some inch, 40-some inch, 6-foot bar, whatever it is you got, doesn't mean you got to use it for everything either. Use the right size saw for the job. If you're cutting small trees and brush, you don't need a big saw. If you're cutting big trees, get a bigger saw. Get a bigger bar. And get the appropriate bar for your saw. If you're running a saw that's, you know, a 70 to a 90 cc saw, you can put a pretty big size chain and bar on that saw. If you go all the way up to the really big boys, you know, the 880s and the 3120s where it's a 120 cc chainsaw, yeah, you can put some big bars on those babies and they'll still cut. But for the average person, this is just for the average person, if you're cutting firewood or just trimming trees in your yard for yourself, a 50 to 70 cc saw is all you're ever going to need for most people. But if you're only doing a little bit, you cut wood once a year maybe just for the fire pit, or if you're trimming trees, a little saw, a 30, 35 cc, a 40 cc saw is all you need, with maybe a 12 to an 18 inch bar. That's all you need. And for those of you that want to know about electric saws, Yeah, they're great for homeowners. Yeah, they're great for people that want to do a little bit of trimming, or if you're an arborist and you want to use it up in the boom, or you're a climber and you're trimming branches, yeah, then it would be fine. But just remember, your battery will die. You will need to recharge it unless you've got a lot of spare batteries. And if you're someone's going to go cut a lot of firewood, you better have a lot of batteries. The new chainsaws that are electric are pretty nice. But I wouldn't get one if I'm going to make my living with it. I might get one to have as a spare, or for trimming, or for doing small limbing jobs on a tree, stuff like that. It's just another tool. Number 3 is probably the most important one. Wear PPE. Wear chaps. Wear gloves. Wear steel-toe boots. Wear a helmet. Wear earplugs and muffs if you can, or if that works for you. Wear either goggles or a face shield. Wear the stuff, because you think you can get by with it, but eventually you're going to get bit, especially if you cut a lot. You're eventually going to get hurt. I myself have been hit twice by a chainsaw in the leg. Both times I had chaps on. One time it was just a little bump, but it would have cut me. One time it was like being punched. It would have cut me deep. I was trimming brush both times because I was swinging the saw back and forth. Wear your PPE. Wear your ear protection. I happen to have one saw in particular that's extremely loud. It's a screamer. It is my 592 Husqvarna. I wear earplugs and earmuffs all the time when I'm cutting, because I'm already about 40 to 50% deaf in my left ear. It was more from shooting, from hunting over the years and shooting guns. But also running a chainsaw and lawnmowers and all kinds of other things when I was younger. I know my hearing is starting to go, so I'm trying to protect what I've got. Wear hearing protection. Protect your eyes. Losing an eye is not a good thing. My grandpa lost an eye in the woods, and he said it was one of the worst things ever. He ended up in the hospital for a very long time because he got infection and everything, so very bad. Wear eye protection. I know people that have been cut bad and have had to have stitches and even surgery on their fingers, on their legs, on their elbows, on body parts that cost them time, not just in the woods, but time on the job. So if you think it's expensive to buy steel-toe boots and a helmet with a face shield and chaps and gloves and ear protection, go pay some medical bills. Wear the safety stuff. Number 4, when you're cutting, use the tools that are going to help you cut better. One of the things in particular are wedges. It's a very simple item. They're not expensive, but if you cut for any amount of time, you're going to pinch your bar from time to time. It happens to everyone, even experienced cutters. You think you know where there's, the pressure is either up or down as far as tension. You think you can get away sometimes with a cut. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. It'll get you, you'll pinch. It'll happen. And if you use a wedge, especially if you're cutting a horizontal piece of wood that has the pressure down, make your top cut, put the wedge in, do your bottom cut, and it'll work just fine. You want to use your wedge. And if you're cutting vertically, where you're knocking trees over, use your wedges to help you guide the tree over. Wedges work. They're simple little plastic tools, or you can make them out of wood if you want. They work great. So use wedges more often than not. Every time I am cutting in a log pile and I'm cutting a big piece of wood and I think I know what I'm doing, I think I can get away with it, and I'll make a cut and all of a sudden I'm pinched. And I should have got a wedge out. So I go get a wedge, and then from then on, the rest of the day I have a wedge in my pocket and I use it because they work. Use wedges. Number 5, use devices to help you manage your wood, especially if you're cutting wood horizontally in a pile, for instance. Use a cant hook. Use a device that you can roll the logs over with, and you can manage them, you can move them. When I cut in piles, a lot of times I use a cant hook just to roll logs off of the top of the pile so they don't come down and get me. I also use a cant hook when a log is on the ground to roll it over to get it to lift it up, so that when I'm cutting, the log is off the ground, so I'm not cutting into the ground. It's a very useful tool, and I use mine a lot. I happen to have a woodchuck. I like it. There's a lot of other brands out there, but use a cant hook. Use some type of device to roll logs around. Use the leverage that you can obtain with that. They're not that expensive, and they work fantastic. There are other things out there that you got to think about using also. So instead of using a cant hook, if you've got a tractor with a grapple, you can grab logs and lift them, and you can cut from those. If you've got forks, you can lift logs and you can cut with logs that way. If you've got a pile of logs, you can cut into the pile, still standing on the ground, and cut the pieces in front of you while they're in the pile, and just work your way into the pile and then move the rounds out. Or if you've got a way to lift logs onto a horse or a jig or some type of a device that you can put the logs on and you can cut in a jig, it's going to save your back there too, and it'll be easier for cutting and safer. So a saw horse or a saw jig device works really good for that. Number 6, I already kind of mentioned, is use the right size bar. Now, there are people that will say, an 18-inch bar is all a man will ever need. Well, I know guys like that, and that's what they're comfortable using, and that's fine if that's what they want to use. But if you're cutting a tree that's 5 foot, 6 foot across, you might need a little longer bar. And if you're cutting logs that are 30 inches, like a lot of times I'll get oversized stuff, it'll be 24 to 30 inches quite often. You're going to save a lot of time by not having to cut both sides. Instead of going from side and then back and cutting the other side back and forth, you can cut all the way through. So the right size bar is nice. Now, one of the other things about bars, and why I left this as its own topic, is that the right size bar, obviously for cutting big trees, to have a bigger one is nice. But to have the right size bar, if you're cutting all day, if you have a short bar, and I found this out the hard way, I used to use a 20-inch bar to cut almost everything, and my brother Ken did for years too. But if you're cutting a log pile, if you're cutting logs on the ground, you have to be slightly bent over the whole time. And if you're cutting tank after tank after tank, I've cut as many as 12 tanks in one day, you're bent over a lot. And the 20-inch bar, your back's going to get tired faster. When you're tired, you're going to get hurt. I have found that for me, because of my height, I'm 5'10" and a half, whatever, I like a 24-inch bar, or 25-inch bar if you're a still person. 24, 25, you'll barely have to bend over and you can pretty much reach the ground without having to bend it all. And you can reach a little bit farther, you can cut a little bit wider chunk of wood or a little bit wider tree. So to me, a 20, 25-inch bar is really nice. Some guys like 28, and that's fine. If you're a little taller, maybe a 28 is right for you. A 20 is really nice also. Now, if you're cutting in the woods and you're cutting smaller trees, like a lot of the trees in Europe that are grown in forest crop, where they're harvesting the trees at a certain age all the time, most of the guys there use 18 and 20-inch bars exclusively. That's all they use, because that's all they need. Because a 20-inch bar lets you cut a 40-inch tree. You can cut all the way around, and you can cut a 40-inch tree with a 20-inch bar. So you can do that. The other thing you're gaining with a shorter bar is speed of your chain. It's going to be traveling faster. So, and you have less teeth to sharpen also. That's another thing a lot of guys mention. But my personal preference, if I had to pick one size, it would be 24-inch for everything. Now, the 24-inch drawback for me is when I go into the woods to do some tree felling and there's brush. It's a longer saw to maneuver through the brush. So that's something to fight over. You know, an 18 or 20-inch bar might be a little better in that situation for most people. So use the right bar at the right situation. And if you're a West Coaster and you're cutting big, huge spruce and Doug firs, yeah, you might want a 36-inch bar or 42 or 60-inch or whatever it is best for your job. But those are usually professional fellers or guys that are doing tree service work. And even the tree service guys, when I talk to them, because I know quite a few of them, because I get a lot of wood from them, a lot of guys say their favorite saw is about a 60 to 70 cc saw, which is like a 400 steel or a 462, or in a Husqvarna lineup, it's going to be like a 560 to a 572, that range, and anywhere from a 20 to 24-inch bar. That's the size most of the guys use most of the time. Especially if you're cutting all day, you don't want to be lifting a lot of weight. So a saw that's in the 60 cc range, 10 either way, 50 to 70, it's pretty much the sweet spot. Number 7 is important. This is another safety thing, but I just thought I'd mention it. If you're cutting and you're very tired, quit. If you're cutting and your back's getting really sore, take a break. If you're cutting but you got a lot more to do, take a break. It's okay to shut the saw off. It's okay to go sit down for a while, maybe even lay on your back in the woods. I'm usually good for about 3 to 4 tanks, somewhere in that range, and I need a break. Get something to drink, sit down, take a break, eat a little snack, maybe sharpen the saws. That's why a lot of times I like to use at least 2 and a lot of times 3 saws, because I will cut each saw a tank with each one of them, 3 saws, sometimes even 4 tanks, and then I need a break and I sharpen the chains. I go to the tailgate of the truck or wherever I am and I get my little vise out and I put the saw into it. I sharpen all the saws all at the same time. I empty the tank on the first saw, the second saw, the third saw, sometimes the fourth saw. It's time to take a break. Sharpening the saws, get a little bite to eat, get something to drink, cool off a little bit, sit in the shade if it's a hot day, go warm up if it's cold out, warm your hands up, take a break. And if you get to the point in a day where you're on your, whatever your limit is, my limit right now, because I'm 60 now, I'm going to be 61 in a couple months, my limit is about 6 tanks. Once I get to about 6 tanks, I can tell I've had enough. I could do 8, but that's on a really good day if I get a good early start, you know, and I maybe take more breaks during the day. And if I don't have to chuck the wood rounds, if I'm cutting firewood and I'm throwing the rounds out of the way, that's a lot of extra work. But then again, that's kind of a nice break to take. Cut a bunch of rounds, take a break, do some chucking, maybe do some splitting, do a little cleanup, maybe do a little stacking, then go back to cutting again. Cutting is the most dangerous part. It's the hardest work. So that's where you have to be the most careful. Take breaks when you need them. Number 8 is basically experience. And the thing is, I would say, is that learn proper saw techniques. And what I mean by that is know your saw. Know what you can do with it, what you can't do with it. Know it's dangerous, know it's safe. Take a class if you have to, I'd recommend that, or get a mentor to actually teach you how to do it. And the number one thing, obviously, is the safety part of it, to wear the safety gear. But to know the saw and what it can and can't do and what's dangerous, you know, use your brake. Know that that tip is the most dangerous part of the saw, that wherever it touches, it's going to throw back at you. Know that when you go into a cut, that you've got to use the edges of the tip, not the front of the tip. That's important. And I cut a lot with the front third of my bar because I cut in log piles a lot. And it didn't happen overnight that I knew how to do that. I have kickbacks still, and it happens, but I'm always aware that it could happen, and I'm always aware that I have to be aware. I got to be ready because it happens. And you got to watch that tip when you're going into a cut. If there's 2 logs like this and you're going into it, you got to know that you want to hit the bottom one first, not the top one. Or you got to hit it at the right angle with your bar. You're not going to want to be just jamming it in there or come up or come down at the wrong spot on the curve of a log. There's a lot of technique to it. You're always better off using the back of your bar to begin with as far as power. So coming into the cut from the front of it, I mean to the back of the bar is where all your power is. And by using your dogs, you can dig them in and you can get more control with your saw too. So learn the proper techniques, take a class, read books, watch YouTube videos, learn your saw and start small and learn as much as you can. And you're always going to be learning. There's always little tricks that you're going to pick up from other people. So learn what your saw can do, watch the tip. Start early. Don't wait till the end of the day to go cut. If you've got a lot of wood to cut, get an early start. Get a good night's sleep the night before. Start early, because if you start early, you can last longer, because what you can do is you can take breaks during the day. By starting early, you're going to be able to cut more wood. I know a lot of guys cut wood after work, or they cut it at the end of the day, or when they have time, that kind of thing, and that's fine. I usually set a goal for myself each time I want to go out and cut. How much can I get cut? Look at the pile and say, okay, I got 3 hours, I think I can get this much wood cut, and that's what I do. So start early, that's important, because at the end of your work day, you're supposed to be tired if you're actually working at work. You don't want to be tired when you're cutting wood, so maybe start early in the morning and go to work later and rest at work. So it's just an idea. Kind of like watching my videos. You can do that at work too. Number 10, if you're cutting firewood, use a measuring device, whatever that means for you. My brother Ken, a lot of times, uses a stick that's 16 inches because he cuts a lot in the wintertime and there's snow like pretty much every day where he is. He takes a 16-inch stick and he goes to the logs and he does little swipes with it, so he sees in the snow right where he's got to do his cuts. Or sometimes he'll take a smaller saw and he'll go and he'll make cuts with his log, his stick on the logs, and he'll know where he's got to cut. Some people can use their bar. They have the right bar length. I made a mark on my bar at one time that was 16 inches, so I would turn my saw sideways, put it on the end of the last cut, look to see where my new cut was, then turn the saw back and cut. And that works just fine. Some people like to use a measuring device, like a mingle marker, where they can make marks on there with paint. It's a little plastic tool that you roll along the log and it makes marks, shows you where to cut. So that's another way to do it. Another way to do it is old school. Tape measure and a piece of chalk. You can do that. Or tape measure and just take your saw, lay out the tape measure, and just make your marks wherever you want to cut. Some people can eyeball it and get it close enough. Now, if you're cutting wood for yourself, it doesn't really matter. My brother Eric burns wood in his wood boiler to heat his house and for his hot water, and he doesn't need to measure. All it's got to do is fit in the stove. So he can take anything from 24 inches down to whatever size he wants to be. He tries to cut 16 to 18, just guessing. He doesn't worry about it too much. And a lot of guys that have cut a lot can come pretty close. But if you're selling wood, you're going to want to be pretty precise, because people want to be able to stack their wood in a rack or wherever it is they're storing it, and they don't want it sticking way out. They don't want, more than anything I have found, is people don't want long pieces, because a lot of people are putting along the edge of their garage on the inside. When they pull their car in, they don't want a piece of wood sticking out. So proper sizes are important. And if you've got a small modern style stove that has a smaller firebox that has to take certain sizes, you're going to want to measure. So those are things you can do. Now, another way to do it, obviously, is there's ways to do it with a magnet marker. There's companies that make those, or you can make one yourself out of a piece of PVC and a magnet. You put it on the side of your saw bar, and then you can make your marks, and then you can cut with the other saw, or you can cut with that saw if you want. To me, they get in the way. They fall off a lot. I don't like them. There's also a measuring device that uses a laser. It is called a ProSizer. They are available. It's ProSizer. There is a red version and a green version. There is one that can be aimed so that there is a laser. You put it on your handle on your saw, and it makes a laser dot where you got to cut, and it's a pretty cool thing. They're available online. You can buy those. My personal preference is cheap and easy. I use, and you can go to some of my videos and check this out, I use zip ties or cable ties, little plastic zip ties. I put them on my handle. I zip them on. I tape them on so they stay, and I stick them out. So from my bar to the end of the zip ties is 16 inches. And I put a little piece of bright tape, either pink or green or yellow, whatever color you want it to be, on the end of them. And I have 2 or 3 of them on there most of the time. All I have to do is take the saw, kind of hold it up to the wood. I look to the end. I know where I got to cut. Or if I come down, I can see the end of it. It's real easy for measuring, especially if you're cutting from left to right, because you can take your saw, set it down, and just line up the end of the zip tie, and you can see exactly where you got to make your cut. If you're going the other way, you take your bar and you hold it on the end of the log, look to where the zip tie is, and then make your cut, and then make your cut. I don't have to have any electronics. It doesn't get in the way. It's flexible. It bends out of the way. Some guys like to leave them on there, and they can just twist it out of the way when they don't need it. Husqvarna actually makes a device that goes onto the end that you can put on. It goes right onto your nut that holds the bar on, and you can use that for measuring, and it folds back. So there's those too. But I heard those are hard to come by. So measure your wood for more precise cuts. So that was number 10. But I've got some bonus ones. Number 11, get help. Neighbor kids are great. Your own kids are great. Friends are better yet. Get help. Bribe people. Get people to help you. If you've got a buddy that burns wood, help each other. Work together. It's really nice to have people to help. I'm very lucky because I have a YouTube channel. People want to come and help because they think it's kind of cool. It's awesome. I got guys that help me a lot, and I really appreciate all of them. I'm not going to name anybody because there's a lot of people that have helped me over the years. It's been fantastic, the people that have come and helped me, and we've done videos together, and it works really nice. Right now I'm really lucky that I've got my wood yard. The people that are there help me quite a lot, and it's fantastic. So get help, or go help someone else, and then they can come and help you. It works that way. So get help. That's really huge. Don't get bad wood. What I mean by that is the better wood you get, the easier it is to cut. If you get wood that's what I call perfect size wood, the stuff that's 8 to 16 inches, it's beautiful because it's fairly easy to cut. You don't need a real big saw. Pretty much any saw will do it. You can do it in one cut. You can handle the pieces. That's huge. If you can actually pick up the pieces and load them onto your splitter or move them around or get them out of the way, that's nice. If you get what my brother calls Abbey wood, by that I mean Abbey normal, logs that are 40, 45, 50 inches across, so he gets a lot of that stuff. It's a lot of work, and if he's got a tractor and he wouldn't have the tractor, it would be way more work. So he's able to lift those pieces with the tractor. Sometimes he has to do some ripping of the pieces, and I do that once in a while too, just to make them manageable. But if you get big wood, really big wood, it's hard to handle. It's a lot more work. You do get a lot of wood out of it, no doubt, but it is hard to handle. The other extreme is the other way. don't get all small wood. Limb wood is great, but don't cut all your trees that are this big or this big. Let them grow up. Little bitty wood does not produce much firewood. You got to do a lot of cutting, a lot of handling of it to produce wood, unless you've got a lot of time. Now, if you're an older person or a smaller person, maybe you want to have wood that's a little on the small side. Maybe you want stuff that's 4 inches to 8 inches because it's easier to handle. And that's a smart move. I guess if I was cutting strictly by hand and that's all I had was a chainsaw and I was splitting by hand, I would want like 8 to 10 inch pieces. They're easy to handle, easy to cut. That would be fantastic. Anything really big, you're going to have to do some ripping or you're going to have some machinery to lift it. If you've got a splitter with a log lift, that's great. But even a log lift on a splitter, once you get to a certain size, it's ridiculous. You know, anything over 30 inches is just hard to handle for anybody in any situation. Then you got to rip it down so that you can handle it, just to load it onto the log lift. Because I have found by measuring and weighing pieces, if you get a piece that's about 20 to 22 inches of oak or pretty much any green kind of wood, except for probably some soft woods, but even like cottonwood and aspen, a 20-inch, 22-inch piece, or oak or hickory, stuff like that, it's a couple 100 pounds. So that big abbey wood is a lot of work. It's going to wear you out a lot faster. And on the other side, like I mentioned, you get little bitty pieces, you're going to have to do a lot of work to produce a little bit of firewood. So there is a sweet spot, and that's true for processors. You want the right size wood, so that's important. So I hope this helped you a little bit. There was 12 tips I gave you, and I think that there's probably some others I'm missing, but those are kind of the ones that came to my mind when I started writing down what would make someone more efficient. Because I had people ask me, what tips can you give me to help me? Or what tips can you give me to help me, you know, be better with my chainsaw? What tips can you give me so I can cut more firewood? Those are the ones that kind of come to mind that really matter a lot. Those are the tips that I guess I would say are probably the top ones. I'm sure there's others, like I mentioned. If you can think of any, let me know. We'll put them on the next time we do another one of these, and I'll add them. So that'd be great. So thanks for watching today, folks. I'll be back tomorrow with another video, same time, 5:30 a.m. Between now and then, go to my channel, watch some of the other videos. There's well over 1,000. Good night, everyone.